No, there was a point there when they were gonna pass something and never had the money. Advice, come on. Why do you have a commission?
Pretty silly.
You are? You got guts. Yeah.
When someone gets stabbed or drives by shooting or ramming, they would ram.
Thank you. Anyway, Wayne, New Jersey, it's a 60s community, you know. I'm saying, Kevin. And they're like,
Just want to hear the amendments for zoning. Just want to hear the amendments for zoning.
hi, Joe.
Yeah.
There's an everywhere. And so you don't know what crazy people are.
Now they're in the policies, in the schools, on the school, like City College and
Yeah.
NYU.
Yeah. Can I read that? I'm sorry. Thank you. I'll be right back.
What Ed told me doesn't jive with me. Maybe it does. Oh, yeah, it does.
Do you have the agenda?
That says nothing about allowable heights.
About what?
What I read there says nothing about changing allowable heights. Did you see that in there?
Yeah, it's in
Oh, okay.
the downtown district.
Thanks for tipping me off about the gate, because I'm totally confused.
And we're going to be postponed to April. Yeah, again.
Okay.
17th?
The 21st.
April 21st?
I think it's April 21st.
Right.
I'll double check, but I'll send it out too. So they're changing the maximum allowable heights here. That's in the downtown district. But the problem
Is this the 150-page thing?
yeah, that's all this stuff here. So, but the problem is that when they're changing, they're also changing the zoning map. When they're changing the zoning map, they're changing a lot of the downtown areas to the business and entertainment district. And in that area, it's five stories, high minimum. So that doesn't really
March
protect
5th.
those areas we want to protect.
Extend a welcome to the press, public, applicants, and the representatives, along with distinguished guests. Dr. Ken Green, our chairman, is out of town, so I'll be filling in for him as the current vice chairman. We ask all speakers to wait to be called to the podium and speak directly into the microphone so all can hear. We ask all to respect the decorum of this meeting, as this board is made up of volunteers who may or may not be hungry. Should your behavior become disruptive, I will ask our resident Jedi Master Joel Shear to escort you out to the hall for a reading of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. That said,
Excuse me, the book I'm using now is the biography of John Adams. It'll put you to sleep in 15 seconds, and then I'll roll you over to the elevator.
That said, the chair asks the staff to take minutes for the roll call.
Ms. Wagner. Mr. Atchison.
Here.
Mr. Graziano.
Here.
Mr. Shippen.
Here. All right. At this time, we'd ask the staff to review the agenda for tonight's meeting. Could you read that out, please?
Yes, we have approval of the agenda, approval of the minutes from February 5th, a privilege of the floor, a special exception for a large accessory structure at 116 Palmer Street, and a land development for a two-family at 635 Line Street, and zoning amendments discussion.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Motion approved. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Very good. All right. Now we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Commission members, you have received and reviewed the minutes from the last meeting. Are there any changes, corrections, or additions at this time? All right, is there a motion to approve the minutes as is? I'll make that motion. All approved, say aye. Aye. All right, minutes are approved. Okay, now it's time for privilege of the floor. At this time, we open the discussion from attendees to address the board on items not on this evening's agenda. There will be an opportunity for the public to speak specifically during the discussion of each agenda item. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the commission? State your name and address and speak clearly in the microphone.
Kurt,
Okay,
wow,
that's clearly.
Thank you.
sorry about that, I
I turned
apologize.
up the octave on the mics, because they were all set at 0, and now they're at 24, so you don't have to be right up on Zoom.
That's great,
Good to know.
thank you. I wanted to say that I'd appreciate it, sitting in the back, if everyone could adjust the volume on their microphones, because this room is really, makes it tough.
Well, that was already done by IT.
Okay. So, having said that, in anticipation of the million square foot warehouse someday actually coming before our planning council, I'm going to ask that consideration be given to locating it in a larger space. I would anticipate that we're going to have an enormous turnout, and I'm just really concerned that there are a lot of citizens who might be unable to participate in the process if we try to hold it here. I've been in this room when there have been issues of concern, and this space is limited. So if it were possible to plan ahead, I would like to encourage the planning commission to do that.
What notice do we have to give?
The regular meeting notice is already out there. If we change the location, I mean, we knew it tonight, we could actually announce it tonight. We might have to advertise the actual location.
We would have to figure out exactly where we would hold it.
Right, first, so that, yeah. Well, it could be administration.
Yeah, administration.
The thing is, what I'd love to see is if we could get the courthouse to give us a room there, only because they at least have security. Because one of the things I do not like about this place is there is no security.
It was the street overlay. So that's this and this and this and this. All of that. So you keep
I mean, I think it's a good one, by the way, because I anticipate that that's what's gonna happen, and when we've had these overflow crowds, it's just not good.
I agree.
Chief of police will come, just ask him.
I'll bring it up to administration.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ely. Anyone else?
Tony Bittman, 36 North 3rd Street. So not on the agenda, in other words, nothing about the ordinance or about zoning or anything like that, right?
Correct.
Okay, so just a concern, I live on the 3rd Street, but to get here tonight, the streets are all parked, they're all of a sudden now they're do not enter, and all the meters are bagged for blocks everywhere, so it's difficult to even find a place how to get here from 4th Street, and all the meters are bagged, and I just sort of giving you a heads up and asking why. I don't need an answer tonight, but it was different than it's been before.
Yeah, I saw they were doing road work on 4th Street, so my guess is that the no parking is there because they're actually doing infrastructure improvements. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, so what they're doing is Medid's bringing power down to the marquee right now.
It's not just 4th, it's back here in this little,
Well, that's because Atlanta can't turn
oh,
right or left down on Ferry because that's closed right now. So
okay,
it's been like that for, let's say probably a month and a half, maybe 2 months.
okay. Thank you.
If I may, I just want to officially report to the public at least, because I shared with all the members of the Planning Commission a copy of the opinion of the court in the case involving Morrison Avenue. That's the apartment development that the Planning Commission had voted against approving the special exception. The zoning hearing board denied the special exception. The developer, BME Real Estate Group, filed an appeal to the Court of Common Pleas, suggesting that there was no basis to deny the special exception. And in the opinion of Judge Beltrami, he sustained the conclusion of the zoning hearing board. I had intervened on behalf of the city of Easton essentially to back up the position of the Planning Commission. And but the people, the interveners, the neighbors, they intervened, they had counsel, and the solicitor for the zoning hearing board wrote a 31-page brief, which was long. I actually wrote, Mr. Shipman would be proud of me, the shortest brief I've ever submitted, 2.5 pages. Well, it's easy to say you agree with the arguments, but I really was focused on the very last of the 9 criteria on the special exceptions. And to me, as long as you've established one of the things that the developer basically argued is that you really can't make an argument because, and what's the purpose of you reviewing it if you can't say that something failed in those 9 points? So anyway, I just wanted to report this in public. I sent copies of this as attachments to all the members of the Planning Commission previously.
Thank you, Tom. All right, any other folks want to speak in terms of privilege of the floor? All right, I want to thank the folks who took the time to address the commission on all these matters worthy of consideration. Moving on, we're on item 5, 116 Palmer Street. Ask the staff to review the application as an introduction for discussion.
The applicant, Chad Danner, desires to construct a large accessory structure, a garage, in the rear of his property at 116 Palmer Street. This metal building will be 26 feet by 32 feet, which is 832 square feet, and will be approximately 15 feet high. This garage will be accessed from Line Street. The applicant indicated this building will be used for covered storage for his vehicles. This property is in the Southside Zoning District, Block 5C, where the proposed large accessory structure use is permitted by special exception for 595-14C. The zoning administrator has determined variances are required for the large accessory structure exceeding 30% of the gross floor area of the principal building and for the driveway being more than 10 feet wide. The recommendation, the proposed large accessory structure use is permitted by special exception in the Southside Zoning District. This proposed use is generally consistent with the comprehensive plan and city codes. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission make a recommendation to the zoning hearing board for granting the special exception request to Chad Danner for a large accessory use at 116 Palmer Street.
Thank you. Is the applicant or the representatives here? It is your option to address the commission before we begin discussion, should you wish to do so. Anything you want to?
I need to say my name and address again.
Sure.
Chad Danner, 116 Palmer Street. The building, the metal building, just want to use a garage for covered parking. On Palmer Street about 1.5 years ago now, there were multiple cars hit, or tires were popped. 2 of my vehicles were hit. And then I know there has been some talk on Facebook pages and elsewhere that there have been attempted break-ins of some cars a few blocks away from me on Palmer Street. So more just want my vehicles protected in the back of my property, which has a parking pad now, and just covered, secured, so I don't run into those instances again.
If you wouldn't mind staying up here in case the commissioners have any questions. This time we'll open the floor to the commission members for discussing any questions they may have regarding the application. I'll begin on my left with Mr. Shipman.
Carl, I take it that the term large accessory building is a word of art. What is considered large?
The garage.
No, but I mean, what are the dimensional requirements?
It just, well, I'll just give you an example. A shed is a small accessory structure. So any garage is considered a large accessory structure.
You're just putting a garage,
Correct.
does it have a foundation?
It'll have a concrete pad. So the company that I got a quote from, it's a metal building. When I talked to zoning, they said whatever they spec out is what needs to meet the requirements. It's a 6-inch pad, I believe, 4 inches of stone with 12-inch by 12-inch border foundation.
It's all metal built?
Yes, metal frame, metal side.
Did I see that there has to be, somebody has an easement? Am I correct? Not on this.
No, not easy.
Okay. That's all.
Yeah, so this is fairly large, correct?
About 2.5 cars, 3 cars.
We have 832 square feet,
Correct.
and how big's the home?
24.5 by 32.
Um,
No, counting the covered porch.
Square footage is 748.
Correct.
So the structure will be bigger than the home,
About, yes.
and we allow for 30% of gross area, correct?
Yeah. For large.
Yeah, that seems big. Also, in the second variance, for driveway being more than 10 feet wide, and you have 20 by 30.
Already existing, correct.
All right, that's all I have to ask.
Ms. Wade?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's under the height restriction. Yeah, or it would have been longer, or variance.
The 15 foot, if I may add, is at the peak. That's not included, that's not the sidewalls, that is the highest point. Yes.
I apologize, I usually try to get around to take a look at the properties before the meeting, and I did not have an opportunity to do this. So, taking a look at this, it looks as though, and I'm using the drawing that you submitted.
Correct.
Right, okay. It looks as though the building itself, between the new pad and the old pad, there's going to be basically 9 feet worth of driveway space that goes back to the back of the building.
Correct.
What kind of cars do you have?
Like make and model.
No, just the SUVs.
I have a hatchback, a pickup, a Jeep SUV, and then another Jeep ring.
Okay. Those are all my questions.
The 9 foot on the side is for a trailer. Do you have, I don't know if that information you're interested in as well.
No, it's good to know though, thank you. Is there any member of the public who would like to address the commission regarding this application? And seeing none, do we have a motion regarding this application, either conforming to the staff recommendation or a modification to the same?
I'll move that the staff be adopted, the staff recommendation be adopted.
All right, we have a motion, is there a second? We have no second. Is there a subsequent motion?
I'll make a motion to deny.
Is there a second? This is going on. As a chairman, I can't second a motion, right?
I don't know why not. I mean, I think you can.
It's a little tough when you have numbers like this.
You got 4 people here, you have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
And I mean, I mean, my suggestion is have a little more discussion as to why people feel a certain way.
Yeah, I think, you know, would you like to share your thoughts?
It's fair enough. I just feel it's too big. I mean, it's known for 30% of the gross floor area of the principal building, which would be what, 250 square feet? And we're talking about an 832 square foot structure. And we're adding a lot of parking. I mean, the driveway's gonna be a 20 by 30 foot slab. You already have a slab there too. Right?
Yes, so the driveway would be over top of the slab that is remaining. Part of that building, yes, part of that building would, there would be a little slab in the front, but part of that building would be on the existing slab's location now. So I would not be adding the full extent of the slab, or mine to impervious.
Yeah. Keep in mind, in evaluating this, 7 special exception criteria was listed, included in the staff write-up. The variance is going, the issue before the zoning hearing board for variance is going to address that 30%, you know, the percentage issue, but you still, it seems to me that the criteria, if you were concerned, would have to do with the, would it not cause overcrowding of the land that would normally be expected from the proposed use. That's one of them, to substantially change the character surrounding neighborhood. You know, I think the parts about causing congestion in public streets is not really applicable. Does the use create a hazard to public health and safety? Probably not. Proposed use is suitable for the site, that's a question for yourself. So I think there's like 3 of the items, and it's not gonna have a burn on water, sewer, school, or other public facilities. So I think you're looking at 3 criteria here, possibly. Use will not impair the supply of light and air to adjacent properties. It doesn't look from the map that there's any properties that close. So it's basically the overcrowding of the land normally expected from the proposed use, or not suitable for the site. Those would be the only criteria to say, you know, I'm opposed to it. And because the zoning hearing board has to deal with that other criteria.
All right, hearing that, do you have any specific opinions around those particular points?
I mean, well, yeah, the crowding of the land, it's a big structure on that right there. Now, granted, the surrounding houses do have garages as well, and I don't think they're as big as this one, in comparison to the home itself.
Mr. Shipman, do you have anything you'd like to share in terms of your?
Well, I think you're the only people on the property, right?
Yeah.
You own the house and you own the garage. Do you have neighbors that would be affected by this?
No, the neighbor next to me actually called me when the notice was sent out about the zoning hearing board coming up on the 17th, and she just asked if, as long as she could see out her driveway, which it is 20 foot back from Line Street, which would be the back street,
Yeah.
and then that 9 foot on the side of the building, there's also another, I believe it's 7 foot of grass plus sidewalk, so it does not interfere with the triangle at the stop sign for intersection. And everybody else, not everybody, but a large majority of people on the block, those sides, already do garages. Some of them have sheds pushed up to existing garages to get more space, and there is a large one on the other side. That's why I was looking for the exemption.
I think it's a lot on a lot, but I don't think it's unreasonable. I think it's a good motion.
We've had additional discussion, and we have 2 motions. Voting in space. Would someone like to make a new motion?
I'll make a motion that my same motion, I'll repeat it.
I second. So there's a motion on the floor. Let's vote on it. All right, Mr. Shipman?
Yes.
Mr. Mattione?
No.
Ms. Wagner? I will vote yes. There you go. That's what the zoning hearing board. Okay, moving on. Item number 6, 635 Lion Street. Ask staff to review the application as an introduction for discussion.
The applicant, Eric Riddinger, has submitted a land development plan that proposes to construct a 2-story building with 2 dwelling units on a vacant parcel at 635 Line Street. There will be 3 off-street parking spaces associated with this application that will utilize the existing curb cut along Palmer Street. This property is in the Southside Innovation Overlay Zoning District, Block Class B, where the proposed 2-family detached is permitted per 595-14B. The zoning administrator has determined no variances are required with this application. Let's see, the plans were submitted to LVPC for review, and the response was the proposal supports core strategy of future LV, the regional plan to increase density in urban areas using infill development. The proposed 2-family detached is permitted within the Southside zoning district. This proposal is appropriate for this location considering the area is residential in nature. The proposed use is generally consistent with the comprehensive plan and city codes. Therefore, the submitted plans titled 635 Line Street appear complete enough to support conditional final approval with conditions.
Is the applicant or the representatives here? Come up and state your name, please.
The applicant, Merrick Riedinger, live at 251 West Milton Street in the South East.
Is there anything you'd like to share before we start discussion?
Not really. Carl summed it up, building a small 2-family dwelling. It's a vacant lot in the south side. Little infill, providing all the all-street parking required. It's a good fit.
Is this the one where I saw an easement?
Yes, there is an easement on
What's
this.
the easement?
So there's an adjacent parcel with a garage, and they would be allowed to use our driveway to use their garage.
You're granting an easement
To them,
to them?
yes.
You use, what, the driveway?
The driveway, correct.
Jesus, I'm not very good with
Can I-
design.
can
Yeah,
I
just
show you?
Just show me what,
No problem.
I don't understand. Sort of.
So this is Line Street, Center Street, Palm Street. This is the garage, so this is not my property here.
Right.
There's currently a whole mess of pavement and all kinds of nastiness there.
So the driveway off, not line, off the curb. Are you gonna be using the same driveway? That answers my question, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Very good. Sure, sir.
Yeah, can you show that to me too? Because I
Oh,
was curious
yeah.
on the back end where that, it's kind of that, on the alley.
So is it making the L and going up to
Do you
that?
have that, look at it.
Yeah, so that's all gonna go away, so that this garage can just basically shifting the L over.
So what are you gonna do with that?
So these are, this is all gonna get torn out as well, and this is.
Yeah, we're gonna come up there. Back there, and then yeah, so this is separate.
That's a separate thing.
That's going on. So this will be, this house is there, or?
This, no, so these houses are.
All right,
They're single families.
that makes sense. And they're rent, they're gonna be rentals. That's it.
I get confused by the overhead, and again, I apologize. I'm sorry, it's not my turn. So, and I apologize, I didn't get a chance to go over and take a look at it today. And I'm looking at a couple of diagrams. One diagram has a red shaded area with a blue shaded area digging into it, right?
Yeah.
It's this one.
Yes. Yep.
And then I have the festive line drawing here with what appears to be lot lines drawn on it. But what I'm confused about is the structure that I believe is the garage that you were talking about them having access to.
Can I show it? You want me to show you too?
Come on down. See, because as I look at this, there's a building here.
So this is the garage. That's currently access to this driveway.
What's this? Huge baby. Give me flowers in. Just kidding. Okay. I figured that out quite a bit, but I was really confused by the drawing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's buildings all over this, how can you call it a vacant lot? But now I see how it is.
This lot.
What's the, what type of material is going to be used for the driveway?
Asphalt paving?
Do we have, it's a question for the staff, is there any impervious coverage issue in terms of this with this?
No. No.
Really?
Yep. Because of how big that lot is, the way it's cut into, almost like a key, he falls right under the 50%. Right at the 50%. So
Works, works.
Eric and I have done that calculation 2 or 3 times. Because originally it was over, and then
Well, I mean, and the difficulty you face is like, you gotta put the driveway somewhere in order to have access to the garage and have an off-street scenario. But I'm looking at it going, big chunk of the lot. So, all right. To hear that question. To do my duty, have you considered putting a solar roof on this addition?
If not, I would certainly explore it.
I think it'd be worthwhile, certainly before all the money disappears, to look into that. We'll certainly work with Representative Mr. Freeman, Bob Freeman, who can help you in terms of looking at some still existing opportunities to
Did you say before the money disappears?
Did I say that?
Yeah. I haven't checked, let me check to see if I got any emails from Mr. Musk.
Don't recall. Is there any member of the public who would like to address the commission regarding this application? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion regarding this application, either conforming to the staff recommendation or a modification to the same?
I'll make the motion to accept staff's recommendation.
I'll second it.
We have a motion on the floor. Ms. Wagner? Mr. Graziano?
Yes.
Ms. Shipman?
Yes.
And I will say yes as well. Good luck with your plant some flowers. Okay. The fun stuff is done. We are to additional business. What do we call it officially?
all right, so next up is the zoning amendments and map changes discussion
Yeah.
for the commissioners. Is everybody aware that they got the LVPC reply? Did they read over it to read their comments?
Yes.
Yes?
Okay.
Okay.
Have you guys reviewed the zoning amendments that were put out? Sent to everybody, to the commissioners?
I have,
Yeah, I appreciate your sending. Yeah.
and Ken Green Dr. Green gave me his comments as well.
Okay.
Which we can go through as well. Just out of curiosity, who wrote this?
It was between Stephen, Carl, and myself, right before Stephen left. So Stephen started it, Carl and myself kind of finished it up, and I finished it up on the back end. Stephen Narowski, the previous director of planning. Correct.
So that would have been end of 2023 it started?
Yes, yep.
When you refer to Carl, you refer to Carl, this Carl.
Yes, this is Carl Mangus, yep, in our department.
All right, well, why don't we go through one by one? Ms. Wagner, do you have any comments, questions, suggestions, edits? Mr. Shipman?
No, we're gonna have to deal with whatever the amendments are, right? I mean, it's pretty hard to sit here and judge, how effective they're gonna be or how many objections there are gonna be, because you don't know, so I think they're fine. Who else has reviewed?
LVPC, I went over with administration as well, with Luis Campos and the mayor.
Their comments were what?
Their comments were, we changed some of requirements for driveway widths.
My colleague just sent me,
Yep.
shipped me the letter, I see.
Oh, for LVPC?
Yeah.
Everything was positive on their list. They didn't see anything to be added or changed of what we submitted, and they feel that it fits their plan as well, especially with the addition of ADUs.
How about the, were there any considerations given when you were doing these plans to the explosion that we have here in Center City?
Yeah, that's kind of why we changed some of the height requirements for the downtown district. We did expand the business entertainment districts on Northampton Street and 3rd Street. So the business entertainment, that stays the same. But as far as the downtown, the height of the buildings have been reduced so that we don't have these big buildings being built in small residential pockets within the downtown.
Well, I think one of the comments that I would have, and I don't have any metrics to support it, is that if you're an old timer, as I am, in the city, when you come down here now, you get a feeling that, wow, all of a sudden, everything's gotten smaller. Because the appearances
Are going up.
it's gone up. The height is, just gives you a different perspective, the lack of it. So what was the height that you reduced the height from what to what? Really talking about the Center City.
Well, the center city, so the business entertainment district, that just stays the same. That wasn't.
Stayed the same.
Yeah, that wasn't changed. So where the B&E district expanded along.
South Third, North Third?
Yep, and Northampton, down to Lehigh Drive, and Northampton up to 6th Street. The rest of the downtown decreased to 55, the height to 55. You still have the requirements for a minimum heights requirement is still 40 feet in the downtown district, which is 3 stories, or a minimum of 3 stories.
All right, well, I think that's reasonable.
Yep.
Thank you, Chairman, that's all.
Yeah, I just got some questions. General view of things. You just address parking, garage parking as well.
So as far as garage parking, I mean, garage parking really isn't in the zone
Well, yeah, I mean,
ordinance.
as far as, yeah, I guess, but as far as the distance from the garage that they're allowed to use the parking space.
Can you say your question again? I'm just trying to understand what kind of information I can.
Well, so a development comes in and they're within 600 feet of the garage, and that's acceptable for their quote for the amount of parking spaces that they need. Has any of that changed at all?
No, so the one thing that's changed in the downtown. So the parking requirements in the B&E in downtown just were moved out of those districts and put into the off-street parking ordinance. Just so there wasn't, you gotta go look here for this, you gotta look here for that. We kind of just all grouped it in the parking ordinance. The one thing that we did change, before you used to add up all the required parking spaces, and then in the downtown, you can cut it in half. So now you're only allowed to cut it in half if you are within 600 feet of a parking garage. So if you're not, you would have to meet that minimum requirement set forth in the downtown district or the business entertainment district.
But they'll still be able to use the parking space.
Yeah, well, so typically what happens is if they don't have the parking, they would have to have a lease agreement with the city.
Right, it's not really.
Yeah. And that's if those parking spaces are available.
a lease agreement with anyone in the city.
Well, yeah, with anyone.
I
within
always
600
want to
feet.
be careful there because I don't want anyone to think that you have to be contracted with the city.
No, you're right, Joel.
And did you want to talk about any of the other, just a brief review of the parking changes required?
As far as, all right, so the mixed-use buildings, like I said, before you could just cut them all in half. Right now, you can't cut them in half if you're not within 600 feet of any parking garage. Or within, for where you can lease off-street parking. So we did, lower the stall width to 8.5, because that's kind of standard. Right now it's at 9. So that gives a little bit more play for developers to fit more spaces in for off-street parking. So that, you know, sometimes they're off by 1 or 2, and then they have to come in for a variance. So you know, they still go through that process to either seek getting off-street parking or getting a variance, but this kind of helps them with their design as far as fitting 1 or 2 parking spaces in. Those were the main, there wasn't really,
Have you counted, I'll talk about parking spaces. We've got to have a monster down here coming, Confluence. How about those parking spaces? Is somebody worried about that?
they're working on their lease agreement with the city to use the garage.
But when that goes in, they're gonna be using some spaces that are in the city garage a lot. What about all the other spaces that are needed? Where are those?
Well, they're gonna have 75 or 77 spaces under the building, well, not under the building, but where they pull in off of 3rd Street, and there's off-street parking around that area. That's under the first level of the building.
They've been in here, I just don't remember it.
Yeah.
Then there was a problem with the water under the building and that.
Yeah, well, that's because they're in the floodplain, so they got to design it to be out of the floodplain.
And how do your recommendations, do they go to the city council?
As far as,
Looks and approval?
oh yeah, no, their project's completely approved.
No, but I mean, when you, with this amendment here, these amendments,
Yeah.
I know you submitted them to the Joint Planning Commission for review. We've looked at them.
Yep.
Is there a committee from the county council or the city council that has reviewed them?
No, that goes.
Can you just walk us through the
that-
process in terms of where,
process.
you guys initially wrote this, working with various people. We're taking a look at it today. What is the ongoing
Yeah,
process?
if you want me to, I can quickly tell you that. At this point, the planning commission, LVPC has to get a right to look at it. Planning commission has to get a right to look at it. Ultimately, it goes to city council. There has to be a public hearing. So there'll be a public hearing. It's an ordinance, so it'd be introduced. And then it would, at the next meeting, at the meeting following the introduction, it's for city council to pass. If city council wants to, the planning committee on city council can independently discuss it. It's not an unusual custom for city council members to meet the Tuesday before a Wednesday night as a workshop to talk about what's being proposed, and the zoning amendments could be one, and more likely than not, should be one of those items that council would be discussing and not deliberating, but just reviewing and having some opportunity to ask staff questions. But ultimately, it gets scheduled. Once the planning commission makes its recommendation, LVPC has now been satisfied that step. So the next step will be at the next meeting, planning commission's gonna vote a recommendation or not?
Yep, yeah, it'll be for the public.
Okay, that's why we need the large buildings for the zoning amendments, not any applications for warehouses or anything, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's gonna be a tough night for the planning commission to focus on that. I suggest they put that first on the agenda. But the planning commission would make a recommendation. Any comments? City council wants to hear if the commission has any comments. So that's the process.
Let me ask another question, Joel. The so many parking, not just parking assessments, but parking planning, there are a lot more experts being consulted. Did the city use an expert? Did they go outside the county or go outside the city?
I was not involved other than observing. There were a number of studies, parking studies done. I don't know what you recall, but there were parking studies done a long time ago. And
Yeah, I don't know if Carl can speak to this, but I can't recall if Stephen Nosky did a parking study.
And of course, they have parking.
Yeah,
Parking
I mean,
experts at the
certainly has.
planning commission.
Yeah, at LVPC, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And on the electric vehicle charging stations, that's for off-street? Or is there an accommodation for somehow to do it off-street?
Well, that would be just for off-street right now.
Right.
So that's just on private property.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Can you do it off-street or?
Well, right now we're writing so engineering, because it's in the public right of way. I think there's somebody up on Porter Street that wanted to do an electric charging station. So we just passed an ordinance for how that design is supposed to be. And as long as you get approval by city council to put something in the public right of way, it would be approved, but it doesn't guarantee you a spot.
Right.
Right, so anybody can go and park there.
I'm just curious about it. So
Yeah.
is there a station at your house that you run a port across or take it to the street?
No, so what happens is if you have an off-street space, right, so you have off-street parking, you would have your charger installed, however it's gonna be charged, or installed. If it's close enough to the building, typically they mount it to the building, it runs to your electrical panel, and then it comes with the 18, 20-foot cord, whatever it is, so you can plug it in. Now, if it's on the, if it's like the one up on Porter, if it's in the right of way, they have to run conduit under the sidewalk, you know, that meets all the IRC code, NEC codes, all electrical codes, back to their panel. And we have a design with a footing, with a pedestal that comes up, that actually has the connection, and they have their own cord that goes to it. Yeah, well, I mean, that's been going on for about 2 years now, back and forth with trying to figure out how we can accommodate some of these chargers. But just so everybody knows, it doesn't guarantee you a spot where that charger is.
All right, and then on the expanded B&E district, the businesses that are currently outside of it will now be inside of it. How does that affect them at all?
No, it doesn't. So all this is doing is expanding the B&E district of what's allowed. Because right now, when you go out, if somebody, so a lot of this comes from if somebody wants a specific use and it's only permitted in the B&E, but it's up Northampton Street, which is in the downtown, and say it's only allowed by special exception. So then they got to go through the whole process for a special exception, even though you see the use, you know. So it ends at 4th Street. If somebody at 402 Northampton wants the same use that's at 326 Northampton, you know, what's really the actual difference? It's just the split of 4th Street.
Oh yeah, I did notice this too. I have a question. Accessory swimming pools, removing the requirement for a fence around it?
What section is it?
I think it said refer to page 35.
Was 35 in the ordinance, or?
It says accessory swimming pool. I don't know if that's an I or L E.
Okay.
Showing it on page 35.
Okay. Let's see here. Swimming pools installed outside of the building envelope are permitted in rear yards, shall be completely enclosed with a 4-foot fence, that's deleted.
Strike that, right?
It shall be set back 6 feet.
Yeah, I would assume it's taken
Such
out.
uses are permitted in rear yards, let's see. Yeah, I'd have to look at that again, I don't know why.
Yeah, I just gotta say it should.
No, I agree. I'll have to double check it for you.
Couldn't get it in short.
Yeah.
And then the ADU too, explain a little bit about that, that's just basically a secondary, smaller building for people who live in the principal house, correct? You can't rent it out or anything.
No, you can't, so, all right, let me go to supplemental statements, just so we're all on the same page. ADUs shall only serve the use that is permitted in the district. So it's only permitted in certain districts, and the lot itself has to be a certain size. And it can only be if it's a detached or a semi-detached. And it does only, you're only allowed to use it if you live in the, so it's almost like a mother-in-law suite or.
But it's not like a tiny house, right? Because I think it's a minimum on size.
Yes, yep.
Is there a max, that was the question, is there a maximum size?
Well, then that becomes like an accessory structure size, right? So, yeah, just like the garage felt, if it's much larger than the principal structure.
But on that, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, on that type of structure, it can't be rented out, correct?
Let's see. Let me just make sure. Just rebuilding. Yeah, right here. So if you look at subsection C, an accessory dwelling unit shall be used only for residential use that is accessory to the principal dwelling on the parcel, such as a dwelling for guests of the residents of the principal dwelling, a dwelling unit for an elderly family member, or for other residential accessory use. So it's not to be rented. It can't be like an Airbnb or anything like that. Yep. Yep. And plus, there's also off-street parking requirements that come with it.
That's all I have.
Yeah, let's start. What was the purpose beyond going beyond the building footprint in order to measure height? So it seems as though, and I apologize because my printer was running out of red ink, so some of my stuff's a little bit faint, but it seemed as though we were allowing sort of a buffer area on either side of the building to be included in determining the base from which we measure the height of a building. Do I have that right? I'm looking at page 18. Very soft pastel pink.
So you're on page 18?
Right, and I guess what I'm trying to understand, and I probably if I'd read it a third time, I might have been able to figure this out, but the way we currently measure building height is based upon the highest point it reaches on the building. So in this example, if I'm looking at something on a slanted hill, it'd be on the highest part of the hill. From that point up, or is it from the lowest point?
It would be from the lowest point, because that's probably going to be where your entrance is for your building.
Okay, so we're going from the lowest point, but instead now what we're talking about doing is an average based upon 5 or 6, actually I feel like I've seen both 5 and 6 foot buffers on either side. I may be confusing that.
Well, I think this is just a cross section. It's not from the side. It's just measuring from grade, right? greater than 6 feet from natural grade. And then we're measuring to the midpoint of the rafters of the roof for the height of the building.
Uh-huh. I guess my point is, what is the purpose of changing the way we're measuring the height? Is it to allow buildings to get taller?
No, I'm just trying to see, was it a definition that was changed? Because we're just looking at the picture. Right, so there's nothing changed on this. It's just a diagram that was added in on how it's measured.
I think I just average elevation
within 5 feet of that portion of the lot.
So are you talking about page?
So I guess this goes back to my earlier question, which is, what's changing on this? Is it just the discussion in terms of what the finished floor level is, or are we changing the way we measure the height of the building?
We're just changing how we measure the building. Because I don't think the original ordinance was clear on how it was changed. And I think it's on page 8. I think you told me 18, but I think it's actually page 8. So it says, the vertical distance of a building or structure measured from, and this is what's crossed out, lowest elevation of the finished floor of the building. And then what was added was the average elevation within 5 feet of that portion of the lot covered by the proposed structure or addition. So what we're saying is if you come out 5 feet and you measure, because before they were going from the lowest, right? So if you come out 5 feet, that's where it's measured at. This is the reference plane, so that we have a defining, I don't know if you see. So if
Yeah,
we
the
have,
reason I'm looking at it is it did not print online.
I got you. So that it's the original ordinance wasn't clear on how it was actually measured.
Whether it was measured from the lowest point or not.
Yeah, so that we're trying to make more clarification of actually where it's measured. Because if it's below grade and you take it from the lowest grade, the house is gonna be, if you're on a slope, if the front of your house is 3 feet in that slope, but say you step down into your floor, you're not gonna measure it from under the ground up to the height. You're gonna measure from the grade outside up to the roof.
I understand. I'm gonna move on from that, thank you. On the temporary use permit, is there a planning commission oversight aspect to this at all? Looking at point F, page 22, who knows how it works out. Point F of 59505. And the concern that I had was this temporary permit could stay in place as long as, was it 6 months or 90 days?
It's 90 days, shall not exceed 90 days.
And there are a whole lot of 90-day things that could be applied for, even excluded from the prohibited uses on here. They could be pretty annoying to people. And so my question centers around the opportunity for some sort of neighborhood-focused input on even a temporary use permit, even if it's a quick review. Because as I read it, it seems like it's at the sole discretion of the staff. Sorry, of the zoning, not of staff.
What would be the zoning administrator? I mean, that's typically who they go to first, if it's a permit for use. I mean, if you'd like to see it go in front of, have them come in front of planning as a special exception for the temporary use, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I think that.
But if it's something like, per se, somebody's having an outdoor small market for 30 days, would you want that to come? I'm just asking, just out of my knowledge, would you want them to come in and go through planning and then zoning, then you're a month, like.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
It's not necessarily to make it cumbersome, but I do think that there has to be some sort of oversight in terms of those sorts of things. And so where I would land on it, like if I was writing it, it would be anything beyond 30 days would need to be looked at by us.
Okay.
Would be my suggestion. Whether it needs to go all the way through all of the channels, I think that'd be.
well, that's the problem. I mean, the way the structure, the legal structure is, the planning commission only exists to make recommendations on special exceptions and have the final say on land development plans. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about how restricted the rights are of the planning commission and how huge they are in the other sense. My concern from a practical perspective, because of the way the whole MPC works and the design, which is not something we can really change, is that you would have to go through the process of the application and the review. There'd be the right to review, and once you have a right to review, people can file appeals to common police court. So if you're dealing with anything temporary, by the time it's going to be moot by the time anyone goes through that process. The only thing you can do, perhaps internally, would be to have some type of process where the zoning, where there's an understanding within your own policies and procedures that anything over 30 days, for example, also needs to get the approval of the city administrator. I mean, something like a second step would be totally internal. We could do an ordinance, but it's not a zoning thing then. If it's a matter of discretion in the first place, then you can expand it with our own city government. But if it's a matter of getting to the MPC because we are defining it as a special exception use, we got to follow the guidelines that exist right then and there. Or ask city council. I mean, you might be able to go straight to city council. It'd be an unusual thing, but if we take it out of zoning, in a sense that it doesn't violate zoning, but I mean, you try to think of something internally, but I can't think of any way you do it formally as part of our zoning ordinance.
Well, I'd like you guys to think about it. I'd like some oversight from an outside body for a temporary use that is beyond 30 days.
We'll go to Wilson Borough. No, because chicken.
Yeah, no, because
chickens are outlawed.
They're not permitted by the health. No, not off the top of my head. I can't think of. Well, it would just be on a temporary permit. It wouldn't be anything permanent. You can't because the health ordinance doesn't allow you to have fouls. But no, if you look at 5, this is a zoning officer, planning administrator, chief code administrator, city engineer, and health officer shall post safeguards for the public health, safety, and welfare as conditions of the temporary use permit. So, Joel, is it something that if one did come in, could we circulate it through them? Like a temporary permit application came in, would you be able to circulate that temporary permit application in for anybody to say, if they have a concern on it from those departments?
I mean, you could do, if the way it's written now, proposed now, it's a matter of discretion, then once you have the matter of discretion, within your discretion, you can create an internal procedure in which your zoning officer would circulate to the directors, for example, and obtain input, because the mayor has a weekly meeting with all the directors, and then you get your public safety people involved, you get everyone else involved, and you could even use language that in granting a permit, the zoning director will confer with the directors within the city. We'll set up its own procedures for input. I don't think we have to get it overly formalized. It's like when we give notice before planning commissions.
Yeah.
We don't have anything in our ordinance to do. We just do it, and that would be a good way. That'd be a good way for cover for the zoning officer too. That they're not taking everything upon themselves. It's a good check. It's a smart procedure.
So we can do, so anything over 30 days would go through that internal process.
Yeah, that works. Right. But the point is just to not have all your eggs in one basket.
I get it. I mean, that makes complete sense.
Okay, moving on. What is the purpose of defining a fraternity or sorority as a use?
Because they're two different things, right? So you have one building that's just a fraternity, and you have one that's just a sorority. So it was just more clarification on the uses. Because right now, if a sorority wanted to open up, they couldn't because there's no sorority use.
I'm okay with it.
You're okay with nobody having a sorority?
If it's not inside of the college footprint, I'm totally okay with it. I've never heard of a quiet fraternity or sorority. Just saying.
Well, there's.
But this goes back to, okay, so there wasn't a definition. All right, if there is a definition, are there restrictions in terms of that definition? Or said, specific to my point, would a sorority or fraternity use be listed as a special exception use?
I'd have to double check to see exactly.
How would you define for what you think? It's a little loose. Fraternity or sorority, a type of boarding house, which is inconsistent with anything. I'm assuming that they meant rooming house, because that's the only other thing that's defined similar to it. Regulated as such, which is occupied by organized groups of higher education students and which is officially recognized as a quote fraternity or sorority end quote by such institution.
Lafayette doesn't recognize sororities, is that correct?
I have no idea. I mean, there are certainly sororities and fraternities on campus.
Yeah, there's some off campus. There's a handful there.
And there's a couple that are off campus that are pretty close to being they're very close to the footprint of the college itself.
I think where this came from, so we get a lot of people that want to have rentals for, right, you say they own a house on College Hill and they ask, how many people can I allow to stay in this rental? And it's 3 unrelated people. So if they have 5 bedrooms, they want to have 5 people in it. So I think what the thinking was that this would alleviate to allow them to utilize more people in those spaces for a fraternity or a sorority.
I have difficulty getting warm and fuzzy about a fraternity house plopping without any oversight into a neighborhood, not going through any process, regardless of how it might benefit a property.
Is that possible now?
Well, that's why we're.
That's the point.
That's why
I don't think it's
there is no
possible now.
use right now for that.
Right, so by defining a use, this goes back to what I was saying before. If we define the use, when does that use kick in? And what is the oversight for that use? Because I've never heard of a quiet fraternity or sorority act. Therefore, it seems like it should be permitted only by special exception, right? And that would have to be the fraternity of church mice for me to feel warm and fuzzy about, but whatever. You know, let's say somebody has a house that's in the middle of a field and they want to turn it into a fraternity house and have letters from the college that say, sounds great to me, okay? Then I'm gonna have a hard time saying, no, they can't do that, because it's not upsetting anybody. Does that make sense?
No, I get it.
So if we're gonna define what a sorority, look at it, I'm doing it now, what a fraternity or sorority is, then that use has got to be carefully made part of the overall code and should require a special exception review, in my opinion.
We could put that in.
That would be great. Okay, moving on. This is kind of personal, but I'm going to say it anyway. Okay, we're in. Yeah, we're in use regulations. D16 having to do with kennels. A place used for breeding, boarding, or keeping of dogs and or cats over the age of 4 months. How many animals does it take, just for like, how many animals does it take for a use to be qualified as a kennel?
So that, there was no change to that? That's been the ordinance?
I understand that, but I noticed it and was like,
I got you. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't know if there's an actual, you know, where that number falls in or lies in.
or let me say it a different way. And I say this as a person who loves dogs and cats. Okay? But if somebody has 5 dogs, is that considered a kennel? Just as we would regulate a person who has 5 cars, right? Once they have 5 cars, I think they're going to start having dealer plates and stuff like that. Is there any number that automatically changes the personal ownership of animals from
Pennsylvania state says if you have over 6, it is considered a kennel. And the reason I know that is I have 6 dogs.
But
they're all spayed and neutered.
in our health ordinance, you're only allowed to have 6 as well. And that's total animals.
Moving on. Yeah, I read this again, and I think I got bothered less by it. It seemed like we were picking on hot tubs, and I don't like hot tubs. It seems as though this, frankly, you picked up on this in terms of the fencing, and then in terms of the hot tubs, it's basically at least X and Y from various places. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah, because if somebody put a hot tub in, you would have to follow what the swimming pool regulations were as far as setbacks.
Right.
That's why we added that definition.
But I wonder if that's part of why the fencing requirement fell out. Because when you started thinking about hot tubs, not necessarily having a fence requirement for a hot tub.
Yeah. Maybe. But I would say that it still should be put back into the definition.
You're gonna understand.
Yep.
All right. Turn a bunch of pages, so that's a good sign. Oh my goodness. Okay.
If you just tell me what page you're on, just so I can get there.
87. My brain just sort of exploded as we got to this, and maybe because I was running out of coffee, but it feels as though parking requirements are getting easier under these ordinances when they should not. We're already having difficulty with parking. To my knowledge, we still haven't quite figured out the parking matrix. You're still trying to figure it out.
So that, that's a whole issue.
Yeah, so I have great difficulty with anything that makes parking easier being codified in an ordinance. So this entire section, and I'm not alone on this, Ken has some comments on it as well, concerns me a great deal. I don't think making it easier to make last time I checked, I haven't seen too many cars getting smaller. They should, but they're not. You know, a lot of people driving SUVs these days, and I see 1 or 2 smart cars here and there. And so until there's a preponderance of small cars, I don't know why we would reduce the size of the space. And until there is a completed study that shows what my gut tells me, that when all of these buildings are filled, we're gonna have a massive parking lot, right? Where's the new lot going to go? Where's the new parking facility gonna go? Until we have a relief valve for parking, I don't think we should make it easier for developers to have less parking restrictions.
So as far as you're saying is less, you're saying the 8.5 width for the stall?
Leave it at 9, I don't care if the ADA is 8.5. You know what, I haven't heard of a person in a wheelchair complaining that there was too much room to turn around. Okay, let's leave it at 9, right? And I'm not too crazy about the idea of being able to squeeze more spaces in for a developer who's creating parking, because too bad.
Well, it's not so much squeezing it in, it's for them so that they can meet their off-street parking requirements.
And I can appreciate that. They need to meet their off-street parking requirements either through a facility or through a realistically sized parking spot, in my opinion. I would imagine when it comes time for us to, because we are going to allow the public to speak to this, but when it comes time for the public to speak, they're going to have some very specific opinions. And I can't imagine any of them being enthusiastic about making it easier to have less spaces, or even smaller spaces.
Well, there's nowhere that we're making them have less spaces. We just changed the width to meet the standard of 8.5 feet.
No, and I understand that from a width standpoint, but in terms of you were talking in terms of the B&E, and expanding the B&E, and the B&E has different parking offset requirements, right?
Which have not changed. They're still the same as what they are now currently.
All right, they're the same as within the corridor?
Mm-hmm. Yep, so the downtown district and the B&E, they're the exact same ordinances that are in the ordinance now. They're just removed from their districts and put in the parking ordinance. So that language.
Everything is in the same place,
Yeah.
It's not different.
Yes, and we actually got a little bit more restricted on the mixed use, because if you're not within 600 feet of parking that you can lease, you can't cut it in half.
Yeah, I like that.
I
like that quite a bit.
Yeah, I
But
think.
I got really concerned because it looked as though we were making it easier. We were actually reducing them. And I'm not the only one who's confused by that. As I said, Ken has some comments on that as well. So, okay. I think it'd be better. Okay, moving on. Enough. Sorry, bud. Could have been worse. Could have had the warehouse.
Well, let me ask you a question. You're county, we can't do anything if the county government doesn't adopt.
No, that's not quite right. As I understand it, this is going to, we are giving our input. It will be taken into account, and city council's gonna look at this. And they,
Do we know what their thinking is on these?
do we have to?
This is our drafts.
The reason this goes to planning commission first is that city council is supposed to show deference to the input from the planning commission, because you representatives here spend more time with these issues than the city council people do. So it's really a matter of this is all part of a process of introduction and review and input, and so that the staff is listening, so it's serving its purpose.
Check brush up. Concerning the mixed use above non-residential use above residential use, that is only in the B&E.
Where are we at? I just want to make sure I'm looking at what you're looking at.
I'm on page 106.
Okay.
Good luck. My writing started really bad. In some cities, if there is a non-residential use above a residential floor, there has to be at least a buffer floor.
Well, right now, it's not permitted at all.
Well, if we are gonna permit it, there ought to be a buffer floor. I don't know exactly what's going on in terms of, what is it, time, on the rooftop. Conceptually, I love it, still haven't been up there, here it's expensive, whatever. But if I was buying an apartment, penthouse apartment, I'm not sure I'd want to hear the bump and screech of people above me. So if there is a scenario whereby there is a non-residential use above a residence, there ought to be a buffer. Read that. Short-term rental, I wrote, guest parking should be accounted for. I'm looking at page 110. No signs posted, off-street parking space shall be provided as follows, short-term rentals. Yeah, unfortunately, my printer really goes nuts. And by the way, it might be better next time this happens, if you guys would print them out for us. Because unfortunately, my printer ink was running out. That's hurting my ability to get comments on this because I couldn't see it unless I want to stare at my screen, which drives me nuts. So, at least on request, we want to get the print out of it. But in looking on point 5, point B, I can't read it. So,
All right, so
is guest parking accounted for in terms of this?
Yeah, I'll read it to you. Right now, it states for short-term rentals, it says one off-street parking space shall be provided for each guest, right? So if you can fit 6 people in an Airbnb, well, in a short-term rental, you need 6 off-street parking spaces, which we've seen an influx of requests for variances for off-street parking. So number 1 is short-term rentals that are an individual room in a dwelling unit occupied by the owner of the dwelling unit. 1 additional off-street parking space shall be provided in addition to the required off-street parking spaces for the building in which the unit is located. 2 short-term rentals that are the entire dwelling unit shall have off-street parking spaces based on occupant load of the dwelling unit and divided in half. For example, a dwelling unit with an occupant load of 6 requires 3 off-street parking spaces. Any half unit shall be rounded up to the next whole number. For example, a dwelling unit with an occupant load of 5 requires 3 off-street parking spaces.
I hate when we chop things in half, particularly when we're talking about short term, because I think it's more likely that multiple people will be driving in their own cars as opposed to butting in.
Well, and then we hear the other side. A family of 5 is coming in one car.
All right, thank you. That was great. I'm looking on page 113. And of course, the stuff I can't read has to do with firearms and ammunition. So what is that all about?
So you're looking at C, general merchandise
Correct.
uses that sells firearms or ammunition shall not be located within 1,000 feet of another use that sells firearms or ammunition. That's typically, that came from any special exception use, well, not special exception. Retail specialty has that 1,000-foot setback from another one.
2,000 feet of what? Maximum square footage of 2,000 square feet.
So we're located in any other than the business entertainment district and street corridor. The use shall be limited to a maximum footprint of 2,000 square feet. It shall be located on the corner lot of a block and only as part of a mixed residential/business use.
Corner lot, maximum footprint of 2,000 square feet, not within 1,000 feet of another. Ryan would be very disappointed in my last one. yeah, then we'll still got ends to get through. You know what? I'm gonna take a look at that. If it's really important to me, I'll email you about it. I cannot read any of the content on page 160.
Okay.
And I think that's where I gave up. So not having access, you know, I almost went to Staples and had this printed out. You know, based upon the huge salaries that we get, which is zero, it would be ideal if,
You could have emailed me, I would have got you a copy.
it would be ideal if we have this stuff, we could print it up on request.
Okay.
All right, going to Ken's comments. Ken did all of his off of the summary.
Okay.
5950D7.
1950. what?
09, sorry.
Oh, 01. Okay. These?
See it there? Habitation and accessory buildings in accordance, etc. 5950D. Can't hear me? Sorry.
No, so 5950D?
59509D7. One second. There's a section underneath that says note sections, etc. Additionally, and then this is what he highlighted, modified the fence height requirements to permit 6-foot high fences in the side yard. Ken's comment was, this is done throughout the neighborhood, so we will no longer get the 4 to 6 foot special exception request.
That's correct. That corrects that.
Outstanding. Moving on to 59513. So, 13C, special exception uses added, grocery store, mixed use, commercial, accessory, electric vehicle charging. Ken's comment was, what is the reasoning for including these as special exceptions? I would have the same question in all neighborhoods where these changes are proposed.
Because they typically, all right, so a grocery store has a larger footprint. And then, so the College Hill institutional transition is made up mostly of housing.
Yeah, refresh my memory on that. Is that the, no, that's the business border.
So that is, I think it's the other side of Cattell Street.
The west side of Cattell Street to whatever it is, Hamilton Street,
I believe so.
something like that, or probably Harding.
Yeah, it's a tiny little sliver. Yeah, that's where the mixed-use dormitory is.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So a lot of it is college-owned dormitories actually in that row there on the front.
Well, that's transitional. So his question was, what is the reasoning for the proposed, oops, sorry, what is the reasoning for these as special exceptions? Because they should not. I disagree with him.
Yeah, I would say they would because of the neighborhood that they would serve and the traffic that impact and stuff like that it would have on it. So a mixed-use commercial is having, you know, multiple commercial spaces within one building.
The accessory electrical vehicle charging.
So that would be, because if you look at the way it's laid out now, it's kind of hard. There's no all-street parking in those areas, so it would need further review to be installed.
Good point.
And that comes.
Well, actually, to say no, there are actually some. Well, they may be all be gone now. There used to be some parking lots scattered back behind there, but I think they may all be built on now.
Except for, I think there's one behind the house that they moved.
Yeah. Well, that would go then to, if somebody wants to put a charging station in, say, Feather House or one of the other college areas, they would have to go through approval process on that.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, well, I'm reading his comments.
Yes, no worries.
Okay, moving on, 59514. His question was, why only the south side?
Or
59514.
but why? Like, what does he mean? Why only the south side? Of what use? Like,
Added I-9 accessory hot tub use for permitted uses, added ADUs, added vehicle, actually, you're adding this everywhere.
yeah.
Special exception, same thing. It's just because it's there, you're showing that you're trying to be consistent across the things.
The districts. Yeah.
You just noted that. Moving on, 59521. B&E. Okay. And this is, down the board is a concern about the entire section. What is the reasoning for the proposed major enlargement of the B&E district, Delaware River to 6th Street on Northampton, Bushkill Creek to Lehigh River on 3rd? We should not be extending the max building heights of 125 to 140 down to the waterfronts. I propose pulling the B&E max down to 85 feet, 7 stories to be in line with the recent, current, and proposed B&E and downtown projects. Just because we allowed a 10-story building in the early, to be building in the early 20th century doesn't mean we need to continue doing so today. Those are his comments on that. So we've expanded, just refresh my memory on that. In terms of the B&E district, we expanded up to 6th Street where it was currently terminating at 4th Street?
Yes.
Do I have that right?
Yep. 2 blocks.
Okay, and then we're making it wider all the way over to,
Not making it wider. It's still the same width. It's on Church.
I'm sorry. So in terms of Northampton, we're just going all the way to Larry Holmes Drive, basically, right?
That's great.
And then all the way up to what, 22?
It stops at Bushkill Street. So it doesn't cross over 22. And the reason why it juts out down by Larry Holmes is because that's the whole parcel of the complex. So, you know, we couldn't split the parcel in half and say only this side has B&E and only this side has downtown.
All right, so I read his comment there, you got that.
Okay.
Okay. 59522. Adaptive reuse. What is the reasoning for the proposed enlargement of the south side adaptive reuse district along Canal Street?
So it's undeveloped right now. That's where Paradise Club was. Shiloh Church owns it, and they're trying to do a mixed-use building for affordable housing.
Yeah, we just approved it.
Yeah, so that will help them in the future with uses in that space because they own that whole lot up to the church. So they have future projects that they want to add on to the church that would make it easier for them to build that there instead of making them go through special exceptions, variance requirements. Because right now that little section is just Southside District. So if you look, the A&R goes down and it stops at Pastor Fred Davis, opens up, and then it goes right back to A&R District. And in LVPC's letter, that was one of their positive points that we were filling that gap in between the A&R District.
Yeah.
So you're trying to bring some consistency in terms of that district all the way down Canal Street? Do I have that right?
Well, it wouldn't be on, so I can't really zoom in. I think it's just the center. no, not center, what is, I'm just trying to go down here. So Paradise, Shiloh owns from Pastor Fred Davis to, I forget what the next block is, no, it's not Iron, so it's not center, I forget what the one in the middle is. I can't see.
Brother Tom.
So it doesn't go to Center Street, right? Because you have Center is where, actually, before Center, can't remember what that name of the street is sometimes.
Come on, dude.
I know. I should know that.
I think it's Brother Thomas.
Is that what it is, Brother Thomas? Yeah, it's another name from the church. So it's just that area. So you still have the apartment complex, and then Monchunk Street with all those residential units, that's still south side. So just that parcel there would add on to the A&R district. From the Hershey building that's right there on Pastor Fred Davis on the left.
Okay.
It's from there to the Brother Street. And that
And the idea on this is to make it more easily developed.
yes, for what Shiloh wants to do as far as affordable housing and their future endeavors.
Is that entire district, Shiloh? Is that?
Yeah, that lot, that lot, they own that whole lot. So it's not like we could just make the front part of Canal Street A&R and then the back lot, because it's just one big lot. All right, same thing that we have down here in the Confluence. We can't cut it in half and have B&E downtown on the same parcel.
All right, moving on, 52925, street corridor overlay, 25B, changing the blanket provision to permit single-family and two-family uses permitted by right in the underlying district as permitted in street corridor overlay. And his question is, what is the reasoning for this proposal? He loves it.
That's my question too.
Yeah.
It seems as though it's one of those things where you're trying to reassemble like things in like areas, but I'm not gonna put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, so the permitted uses, all uses permitted by right in underlying zoning district shall be permitted by right in the street corridor enhancement overlay, except A1s, A2s, A3s, A4s, A5s, and A6 uses. Those are all subject uses to supplemental standards. So if they fall in under the underlying district, that's where they would be approved. Because right now, if you look at it, it's you always have to reference back to the underlying district for those uses in the street corridor. I think it was more of just a house cleaning object.
That's what it feels like. Okay. 59532, supplemental standards. Revise off-street parking requirements and prohibits short-term rental use in an accessory dwelling unit. And his question was, why allow this in the B&E and overlay districts?
I don't believe it's allowed in the B&E. Prohibit short-term rentals in accessory dwelling.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. 32A, 6A, right? Modified to allow the non-residential use of above residential use in the business and entertainment district and street corridor overlay for mixed residential business buildings.
And I think that goes back to the same comment that you had about having a buffer for it.
Yes, of course. obvious question is why allow this in the B&E and overlay districts? But the comment, but that would be based, the only place you can do it is in the B&E and overlay districts.
Yeah.
And then it goes back to my comment of, you need to have a public water permit.
Mhm.
Answered. Sorry, last one,
Round falling asleep.
33D. Here we go. All right. This goes back to, yeah, so this is 59533, off-street parking and off-street parking. Right? And this goes back to the same concern that I had, and I told you he had the same issue. Right? This reduces parking requirements for new and changed uses. Is the city looking to acquire properties for future construction of parking structures to address the issues these changes will exacerbate? And again, as we discussed it, it feels as though when you look at this, even though this is a language consolidation effort, it feels as though you're actually making it, you're actually reducing, how do I say this? You're actually reducing parking or making it easier for a developer not to have parking. That's how it feels. But what you're telling me is that these changes are just a consolidation, not a change, and in fact, you've made it more difficult.
Well, the other ones make it more difficult, right? But they have with not allowing them to cut in half if they're not within the parking structure.
Right. Of course, we know, I really don't like 33H1.
33H1? Oh.
That's the high that you have.
This, I believe this one came from, if there was a change of use of a property, that, you know, you're grandfathered in what the original use was, right? For their off-street parking per se, before the zoning ordinance. So when we review an application, say it's, you know, a barber shop, they need X amount of off-street parking spaces, which they never technically had, but they're grandfathered those spaces by our zoning ordinance. So if they are required to have one more off-street parking space for the new use, this kind of comes in to allow them to use that use without requiring another off-street parking space. If that makes sense to you.
Not a lot.
Right, so it doesn't put the burden on a small business going in there, and they have to go through the process to get a variance for one off-street parking space if there's an increase in the previous demand.
But I guess, so when we start getting into use changes and grandfathers carrying over, I have difficulty with that.
Well, the issue is, so say you open up a business, right? And the previous use has always been there, existed. There's technically no off-street parking because it's always been there, right? So you're grandfathered 10 spaces, right? So you go from a barbershop to a barbershop, there's no increase in parking demand because it's still the same use. But if you change the use and now there's an additional parking space required for that use, or two, this would help alleviate that small business of needing to go through for a variance for one off-street parking space.
But if they've changed the use, why wouldn't they have to go through the full process?
No.
Just because they got lucky and the barbershop was given grandfather?
Well,
I mean, that starts jacking up the value of all the grandfather properties.
well, all of them are grandfathered.
Hold on. And then we end up with a scenario where you've got a premium of grandfathered spaces that can be, you know, sloshed around with new uses. I hate that.
So what happens with those is, say if there's a use that comes in that demands less, that grandfather number gets reduced, and that's what the new off-street parking, grandfather number is. It doesn't stay consistent, so if you look at the VFW that turned into Nurture Nature, they were grandfathered, I think it was 188 off-street parking spaces when it was the VFW, right? So when Nurture Nature came in, it got reduced to 80-something because of their parking demand for Venture Nature. So you don't keep the higher amount of off-street parking spaces grandfathered to a parcel.
So it can go down, but it doesn't go up?
Never goes up.
But the new use still drives the grandfather aspect of this, does it not?
Well, and there's language in here that reads to that as far as computing off-street parking spaces.
New language to further clarify the off-street parking requirements when there is a change of use and for location in existence prior to the ordinance.
Here, so if you go to G, buildings or structures undergoing a change of use shall have the required minimum off-street parking calculated as per this section. If there is a requirement for more off-street parking spaces than the current available, the additional off-street parking spaces shall be provided. Buildings and structures in existing prior to the enactment of this zoning ordinance that do not have the required number of off-street parking spaces as calculated as per this section shall be credited the number of off-street parking spaces required by this section but are not provided on the site. Technically, of grandfather spaces.
That feels like it takes me back to my first problem. It's like air rights. I mean, you could sell your grandfathered spaces if somebody that witty and charming.
No, well, we wouldn't allow that.
But
Because if someone says, hey, I need to lease one spot from you, it's not, I'm gonna lease a grandfather spot from you. Because it's no true off-street parking space for that use.
all right, well, this is Ken's issue, and I have represented it as best I could. To your knowledge, is the city looking at acquiring properties for future consideration of parking structures to address parking issues?
That is gonna be in the future. I don't know how far in depth they are yet, but it's inevitable that another parking structure is gonna have to be built.
It has to. You know, I get really concerned about making changes in advance of reality, right? So we can't reduce parking. You know, it's like if we had a mass transit system or some sort of, you know, public transportation system that alleviated our need for people to drive down from College Hill or from the West Ward, then we can start talking about, well, maybe this parking requirement is too stringent. But we don't have that yet, right? We should be thinking about that as part of the next comprehensive plan, right? Until there's a, you know, ride-share autonomous vehicle program in place, there has to be a mass transit alternative. And while that was talked about in the previous comprehensive plan, it was thought of only in terms of buses, right? And we got to get outside the box a little bit, think a little differently about it, in my opinion. There have been a number, and I forwarded this to a couple of different people, but there have been a number of cities all over the world who have been testing autonomous vehicles as a means of adding to mass transit with great success. And that was 5 years ago, right? So I gotta believe it's even better now. You know, am I crazy about having an AI drive me around? Nah, but you know, it's an alternative. That's me. I'm old school. I like driving my Mini. But getting back to the topic, I don't think we can start reducing parking burdens for development until we have a reduction in parking demand, right? And that's either through increasing the parking supply or having a better alternative. So, and it sounds like ultimately that's where you guys are as well. But in looking over the revisions, that was not clear because I had the same reaction as Ken did. It felt like it was making it easier on developers, and with the exception of the reduction in parking space size, which I have gigantic problems, and we discussed that. Most of the stuff you guys have done has actually gone the other way. But in looking at the representation on paper, you know, and the public may feel the same way. You got to be really careful about that. You know, as we get to a public forum where people are going to be responding in terms of that, you could probably inoculate yourself against a lot of questions by reviewing that consolidation as well as what the real impact is versus previous.
Yeah, well, the downtown district, like I said, the downtown and the business entertainment, those parking requirements have not changed. So right now, if you build a residential use in the downtown that's less than 4 spaces, four units, you don't have to require parking for it. That's in the ordinance now.
Say that again?
So if you build a non-residential, a residential building with 4 units, you don't have to supply them with off-street parking as the ordinance is right now.
Really?
Yeah,
Is that owner occupied or just period?
just period.
Don't say that too loud. It works. Why he doesn't know this? All right, that's all I've got. Is there anything else you want from us in terms of comments on this?
No.
One thing I did note, as an aside, was near and dear to my heart, discussion in terms of solar panels, only talked about clarifying the fee for not removing solar panels. I would love for us to be more supportive.
Actually, we changed the whole thing because right now our zoning ordinance restricts you from putting as many panels on, as you can on there and still meeting the building code. The zoning ordinance right now says you have to have a 3-foot setback from every roof edge. So and I handle all the applications that come in for solar panels. Every one of them that they supply, I have to grudgingly tell them that they need a variance because they don't meet the setbacks. And that it's coming up in the zoning ordinance that it's gonna be changed to meet the building code, so that all you need is your 3-foot space up one side and on the ridge, so then you can get an adequate number of panels on the roof. So that was all changed in there as well. So
How are we doing with applications for solar panels?
there's a ton coming in.
Yeah. New construction as well?
Not so much new construction, existing buildings are getting them. A lot on South Side, a lot of at the Highlands.
All right, that's all we've got. Do we have anything else?
You gonna open it to the public?
Should we do that at this meeting, or is there another opportunity?
Well, the next one's public. The next.
Well, no, I know that, but the public's here, and in theory, because we said in the beginning, don't speak about agenda items, I think they really have to.
Technically, it's on the agenda, and they weren't allowed to speak about it.
That's
Yeah. All right, so is there anybody from the public who would like to come on up? Tony, why don't you come on up?
And you can restrict, comments to 5 minutes or whatever amount of time you wish to, you can have a certain degree. It's your discretion.
Tony, how much time do you need?
Maybe 5 minutes.
About 3.
3 minutes? Okay. Tony Mittman, 36 North 3rd Street. I'd just like to put it in perspective that Easton is a city, a beautiful, small American city with 28,000 people. And personally, I can't see why we need 150 pages of a zoning ordinance issue with this. It just seems like overkill, for one thing. And also, the downtown historic district, which is from the river to 6th Street, is already a local historic district, which is a zoning ordinance with restrictions about scale, mass, height, all of that for new construction. So I was glad to see that in the changes, the historic preservation issues are addressed, but it's more important that we enforce them before the Historic District Commission and the Planning Commission about scale, mass, and height and all of that, which has not been adhered to with a lot of these massive projects which are under construction, which is a shame. We have to remember that Easton was designed in 1752 for horse and buggy. All the streets we have now have been here since the 18th century, and so trying to stuff it full of vehicles is always going to be a challenge. I also want to mention that our family has restored and owned 9 major properties, 5 downtown, 3 on College Hill, and 1 in the West Ward. And the whole purpose of zoning at all is to protect real estate investment, local citizens, our vested interest, our quality of life, and our real estate values. And so when variances are granted for things that are way out of scale, like we're surrounded by right now, it really lessens our quality of life. and changes the entire character of Easton. So I just wanted to put that for the record. And also, I think we have to be very cautious about zoning variances, because variances, I live on North 3rd Street, and I've lived there for 9 years, and the character of that block has changed significantly because of the introduction of new restaurants and businesses right on either side of me and right below my apartment, where the noise level is unbelievable. And when the parking garage was plugged into New 4th Street, my apartment is now lit up at night. It's never dark anymore. So, you know, zoning variances impact real people, real estate, and real lives. So thanks for listening.
Thank you. If I may just make a comment about just the term variances. What we're talking about here with zoning is not variances. These will be the requirements, and the variance is something when you want to get relief from what the actual ordinance says. The zoning, you on the planning commission, I say we, but you on the planning commission never deal with the variance issue. It's still something that blows, sort of blows my mind that you don't get to look to make a comment to the zoning hearing board. But I understand why, because if the zoning hearing board is doing their strict evaluation, it takes an awful lot for an applicant to ever meet the burden they have to get a variance. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that there's nothing being proposed that creates that you could get a variance from this. Now, this is the law you're supposed to comply with, and if you can't, you're going to have to show a hardship before the zoning hearing board, and the definition of hardship has to be that you can't develop the land in conformity with zoning because of unique aspects of the land, or et cetera. There's different gradations there, but it's tough to get a variance. So I just wanted to highlight that there's nothing in these proposals that varies anything. It's what we expect every developer to be able to meet, and when we have special exceptions, that's when it's in theory permissible, and that's why if you get a chance to read the case that that was before you, there's a very good discussion there about reviewing the special exceptions and the criteria. It's a really good educational piece for the members. So I'm sorry for the interruption, but when I hear the word variance, I get excited.
Quite all right, yeah, you're 2 minutes. We can't variances.
That's what I'm saying.
No, and the point is to clarify that when we're looking at different issues, a variance, we talk about variances only because they're part of the application and it's been determined that a variance is needed, which means the applicant's got to prove to the zoning hearing board that they're extremely special and that they have a significant hardship based upon what the law says. What we're talking about right now is what the law says.
And what we'd like the law to say.
What we'd like it to say as well. Was there somebody else who had a comment? Yeah.
I'll throw a couple things out.
Garbage can is over there. You say you want to throw a couple things out?
This will go up. Jeff Martinson, 204 Bushkill Street. I think if you think about the downtown district, the BEI, or the Business Entertainment Extension, basically cuts the downtown district into 4 quadrants. What's left, right? I think that each quadrant has its own unique characteristics. And I actually think the one quadrant along the river is being minimized.
What's the word? Are you going to help me with the word, Ron?
Diminished in it, because if you're only going 55 feet in height, you're taking away maybe some of the best prime real estate that we have in this town for future development along the river. Hubert mentioned time, the building. It's taller than 55 feet, it enjoys a great prominence, it has a restaurant on top, great views, everybody loves it, successful project, etc. The rest of the properties over here, when I moved here in 1986, we were debating Larry Holmes' first development there, 6 stories. Historic Easton was involved. There was lots of questions, lots of comments to say, hey, take that building and tuck it next to the Hotel Easton, make it 9 stories instead of a 6-story building, take up less land, all those types of things. Those buildings, to be quite honest with you, are not the greatest pieces of architecture in Easton. Those, whether it's the DPW building, the Larry Holmes 5-story building, the 2-story Larry Holmes restaurant building that's now owned by the attorneys, etc., and the two 1-story federal buildings behind it, the former Social Security building, etc. That area needs redevelopment. The buildings are 40 years old. They're going to be beyond their useful life. And now we're going to tell a developer, possibly, develop something along the river. Oh, and by the way, you're in the floodplain, so you have to elevate your building. So they're automatically the guy's losing 10 feet. I don't care who it is, right? Because we're elevating the building up above. And the other thing is, I also think that we're giving these properties, all of these properties downtown, there is a disincentive for people to provide parking on their site. When you say you only have 55 feet, and in the case of the 4th Street proposal that was given out recently, it's got 2 streets, a street on either side. Which street is the principal entrance? We don't know to that property.
Would be 4th Street, we'll go off the
But they could be off of West Street. They could change that. So there's 2 principal streets there. Regardless, if the developer wants to make maximum use of the site, we want that developer to provide as much parking on the site as possible. That's really number one. Rather than to put the zoning officer in a position where a developer says, excuse me, the language is here, you're allowed to go within 600 feet if in the determination of the zoning officer, there's practical reasons why that can't be provided on site. Okay, make the guy provide the parking on site, but don't disincentivize him for providing that parking by limiting his height. These are things that are counter to rational thought in my mind. Same thing along the river. It's in a floodplain. It has to be elevated above. The developers, what happens if he provided 2 levels of parking? He has no project. We have no views. We have no redevelopment there. Maybe there's an option for an overlay district within that. I don't know. But each of the 4 areas in the downtown that's left, with the extension of the business entertainment district, has its own unique characteristics. We have topography here, in this district behind here. There's topography on West Street in going back that way. There is no topography here. Those are all limiting factors for developers. I think we need to provide smart development and incentives for people to do proper development and provide the necessary parking for their project on their site. So we as citizens don't have to provide it for them.
By going up, is that what you're saying?
By allowing greater height, 55 feet is restricted on if you're providing parking below the building.
That's an interesting point. Thank you, Joe. Anyone else?
Vanessa Unvarsky, 64 North 4th Street. So I want to start just by saying that I think one of the main reasons that we printed everything out at Staples because we were concerned because on social media and a lot of the places that we were hearing about the change that was that it was in favor of restricting the height requirements. And it sounded great. It sounded, okay, we're all in this community worried about things going up so high, not looking like they fit within the neighborhood. But then when we saw all of these pages and that you're essentially taking the downtown area and expanding that, some of the areas that we're concerned about are now for the B&E, and the B&E district is not being restricted in height. That is required. It hasn't even been for 5 stories. It's only in this specific downtown area, so that's a concern for us too. And I think as it relates to parking, yes, we need to definitely force parking to be provided by the developers. And if we can't go up higher, maybe it just doesn't need to be so massive and so big.
we have a ton of, single unit apartments, a lot of studios, several of them. We have, when all the development is said and done, plus what we have available right now that is not, I know there's a housing shortage, but there are a ton of apartments that are available and coming online, and we do not have parking. We are in a major deficit for parking, and the more that we allow them to take the parking garages, there's nowhere for people to go. People are not gonna come downtown, they're already leaving. They have tickets to the State Theater and they're going home because they can't find parking in time to go see the show. It's getting, in my opinion, we're already kind of in a bad place. And so if we're going to, and I do need clarification on some of the parking here, we are gonna make it appear, and that's why, another reason I wanted to come is because it does appear that we are making it easier for developers to limit the parking or not be required for the parking, because, it might just be the way that this is worded, but it says after calculating the required off-street parking, and this is in the, 59533, it says that you can reduce, and I hadn't seen this before, you can reduce, the off-street required parking by 10. If you're allowed to do that, can you decrease it by 10 and then it's cut in half? Because that was new to us, we had not seen that before.
So that section you're talking about for the B&E district,
That is,
right? Was that parking for the B&E? Is it,
Well,
because there's two things that note, there's one that notes downtown and then there's one that notes the
it's
B&E.
the 59533 off-street and on-street parking, and I think it applies to both.
What section is that? So I got 59533, what section are you referring to?
I think it's the downtown.
So E1 and 2?
Yes.
So those ones are current ordinances. They're just relocated so that they're all in the same section.
Yeah, so I saw the top one was located in the downtown section. I did not see 1 and 2 in there.
So 1 and 2, you have to go to the district. If you go to downtown,
Okay.
you'll see that parking is in there.
Okay.
It's crossed out. And then if you go to the B&E district,
Okay.
so if you go to 59520 and then 59521, you'll see that they're scratched out to be relocated to 59533.
Yes, and so that's what I see here.
Yep.
But there's only one of those paragraphs, which is the guidance.
So this one you have to go to the business entertainment district.
But where is this talking about?
So if you read this, it's kind of, it spells it out a little bit better in this, because it's very vague. So what we did was, we basically wrote it out better so that you can understand what the parking requirement is.
Okay, I still don't understand it, I'm sorry.
Like if you read the original, and then you read the one that's in the parking ordinance part, it says exactly the same thing.
Okay, I'm confused because it doesn't say anything about the 10 parking spaces in the original. That you can decrease it by 10.
So what it's shown is a new mixed-use building shall be permitted to be reduced by a maximum of 10, but not more than 6 for non-residential components and not more than 4 for the residential components. So if you go back to the top of that paragraph, after calculating the required off-street parking spaces required in 59533B, new residential uses shall be permitted to be reduced by 6. That's where that number 6 comes from, just for non-residential buildings.
Got it.
Right? And then, I lost my space there. For non-residential uses shall be permitted to be reduced by 6. And new residential uses shall be permitted to be reduced by 4. So that's just residential. So now the next one is a new mixed-use building which has a commercial aspect and a residential aspect. Those two numbers are just added together.
Okay, so I understand what that means. I did not see that where it was scratched out in here. Only the top paragraph was, and it wasn't listed in here.
Yeah, that was added in this language to clarify what the requirements were for a mixed-use building.
Okay, so then, and then if you're located in an area where your parking lot requirements, your parking space requirements, is that number
Well, no, so if you go down to F, mixed-use buildings,
Yes,
so before, it used to be all of downtown could be cut in half, no matter what it was.
right,
So now it's only for mixed-use buildings.
okay.
You can't take just the non-residential building and then after your 10 spaces are off, then cut it in half again. Right, so mixed-use buildings, total requirement shall be the sum requirements of the component used, computed separately, except for the downtown district and business entertainment district, where the sum of the requirement components used, computed separately, may be reduced by half. If the property is located within 600 feet of a public parking area or garage, and the public parking has capacity for the required off-street parking demand.
So that is,
Yes. Because that makes it more restrictive, because before you can just, you're able to cut everything in half.
so you're saying that is going to be limited, and then
So,
a new mixed use building can still be reduced by half.
only if it's within 600 feet of a parking garage. So say if they're 625 feet out, they couldn't cut it in half. They would have to give off-street parking for, whatever the requirement was for the mixed-use building. It couldn't be cut in
Almost
half.
everything's within 600 feet of a garage.
All right.
I'm gonna need to
Again.
remind us of time.
Okay,
So,
I'm sorry about that. And then
is that the biggest of what you had, or?
that's the biggest one I had. I had one other question, which was why would we take out parks as a permitted use in the downtown area versus, it's been moved to the special exception? And I was just curious of why we would do something like that downtown, especially a parks space.
I think, let me see. Let me go look.
It was removed as from a permitted use development, clubs, parks.
So it was put in as a special exception.
Yes, I was wondering why.
I believe the reasoning behind it was just to have more talk and discussion for it. Because you figure that the downtown itself, right, so that's the hub of where residents are. I understand where you're going with green spaces. Believe me,
We don't need parks here.
but no, believe me, I get it. We're doing a whole riverfront thing that's gonna have tons of green space.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Please, you've been patient.
Great job, babe.
Samantha Porter, 119 North Bank Street. It's really just, we're part of this new extension of the business entertainment order. And I want to know how that impacts the home that we own on North Bank Street, considering there's two houses and a church parking lot.
It won't impact your house at all until something's either changed, say you sell it and somebody wants to redevelop it into a use that's permitted, or they can keep it the same. So at this moment, nothing changes for your house.
Okay, so the houses that are located on 3rd Street behind our house, so it goes back to back. If the property behind us wants to change use into some commercial, and that ends up to the rear of our back garden, which has already happened to us on one side with a bar and a hotel, that will impact our property. So the fact that we're in that zone now, what safeguards are there for our home against something happening in a property on 3rd Street, which is our direct neighbour,
Yeah.
but above.
I mean, as far as, you could come and contest it when they do, when whoever tries to develop, or even if it ever does get developed. But I mean, with the way the ordinance is set up, if it's a permitted use, they can go.
The fact that the business entertainment district is being extended means that change of use guess, easier, there's more options?
Yes.
Because- Right, so
Yes.
opening up that area for more change of use?
Yes.
There's the
And if you disagree with that, you should make your opinion known to city council when the time comes when they have a public hearing.
Well, I mean, there are two pieces to that. One is that the staff has taken on being more reticent about making sure people know when there's a person who's coming in front of the board to propose an abuse. So you should hear about that.
Right, we received a letter about this meeting, so the only reason to know about it,
Right.
it's the first letter we've ever received about anything.
That's something they've been working very hard at over the course of last year, so I'm glad you got it.
We'll find out when those meetings
Well,
are.
and that we have to do, I believe, when
Yes.
we're doing this zoning map change.
Yep.
That's a state requirement, as opposed to our own imposed requirement.
And then it's also on the City of Easton's website page, it's on their Facebook page. I know I had Tracy post on there as well. So I mean, we're trying to get as much information out to everybody so we can get input from the residents, so they know what changes are proposed, or, you know, what developments are
That's why
coming.
we're here, I'm concerned that once all this is rubber stamped, that things start happening around the location of our home that we don't hear about, and, you know, on Facebook and whatever, but I also work full time. You know, I go on holidays, I may not be here, and I don't hear about things. And there's suddenly, you know, there's a commercial property.
So if you're with, so whenever,
A yard, which,
when-
like I say, that's already happened to us, to one side of it. And we now have to put up with a public park that's practically in the backyard, which, you know, on a side note, no one seems to care about, despite the conversations that we personally had with people in council, with, et cetera, et cetera. So we're pretty limited with our patience and what can happen going forward for a property that we own and try and enjoy. That's becoming more restricted on a daily basis. So it's important to us. I know we're just one or two homes down that street, but, you know, we care about our home, we've got a lot of money into that house. I'm not really interested in selling it, I actually quite live in there, and I'd like it to remain there. Which is why we're here.
I understand.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else? Come on up.
Lisa Patino, 22 South Second Street. I had a question about what you were saying about the confluence and the 73 spaces in the center. I was here at those meetings, and it's burned into my brain, everything that they said. And after that meeting, we went to the council meeting. And the whole thing is just a debacle, because what did you say about those 73 spaces? Who's got access to this?
It should be the tenants and whoever's using their, I think it's gonna be a restaurant there.
At the meeting, they said that was not for any of the tenants, and that they were supposed to be contracted in the parking deck here. So now that's changed? We didn't know that changed. When did that change?
I think through discussions with the lease agreement for the park.
Why didn't we get to know about it when we were here and we were upset about it? I'm not the only person that was upset about the whole situation. Because the mayor got up at this very podium, which I thought was kind of a conflict. And he said, we don't have a parking problem in Easton. And when we do, we'll build another parking garage. Where exactly would that go?
I don't know at this point.
And so this whole thing over here, I'm seeing that this is going to be a debacle. It's going to be worse than you ever imagined it to be. I can't even get one space for the property I own on 2nd Street, let alone 10 and whatever you're talking about. These people are getting all kinds of permission to do all kinds of stuff, and I can't even get one space. There are people who lease storefronts, and they're allowed to have a space on the street, and I'm not. there's so much double standards and stuff going on, and then when we went to the meeting with city council, because they told us that's where we had to voice our complaints. We went to that and they bullied us and wouldn't let people talk. They passed it through. This is a nightmare, and you're trying to make it another nightmare by allowing all this stuff. And I feel sorry for that woman, because it sounds like she's already got a problem, and God only knows what can happen from here. That's terrible. This is terrible what is happening to the city. I've been down here since 1986, and it is a disgrace what's happening. I really feel sorry for a lot of the people who live here. People have kids. It's a nightmare, and this is not a good idea.
What's terrible about what's happening?
What's terrible?
Yeah.
Because they don't care about the people who are already here, and they're making it easy for the developers to just keep putting all of these apartments in, and they use these silly formulas that don't work. They don't work. There's not enough spaces for the small businesses to run their businesses. On the weekends, they can barely function. I have friends that own businesses in town, and they can barely function in their neighborhood because there's not enough spaces. There's not enough parking on the weekends. It's a joke. It's going from bad to worse, and it's just going to be.
Why do you think people are coming to this thing?
They're coming here to eat. I know that, but they're coming here, and there should be plenty of spaces for everyone. If the city says that, the mayor says that we're going to have another parking garage if we need it, where's that going to go? In the middle of the river?
How would you create spaces? What would you do?
I would certainly not let what happened over here happen, where they don't have their own parking. The one place that you can develop and put a parking garage underneath the building is in a flood zone. It does not matter.
If I can step in here a little bit. This commission shares your concern about having a clear picture of what the parking situation is. Okay? This commission works very, very hard and has denied more than a few projects because the allocations for parking were so inadequate that we could not feel good about it. Several in the downtown area. So we pay attention to that.
Well, where would the mayor put another parking lot? Where's that?
That is something that
we have no more space.
I can't answer that.
We're
If I could give some relief to the planning commission chairman, or acting chairman, just speaking from observing you're working directly with administration, these comments, all of which are valid, and you certainly have every right to express it to the planning commission for purposes of their input in reviewing the zoning, but to be really heard, my recommendation is to come, and I know you may you come before.
Where they bully us and don't listen
Well,
anyway.
but it's the only place to go where that will make a difference.
It doesn't make a difference.
Well,
Bully us just like they did last time. What are we going to do about all those people who are going
well,
to go to this hotel?
This group is not going to.
Where are those people going to go?
This group is not going to be able to answer you. And that's,
right. No one can answer any of these questions because the plan's already made. We know the comprehensive plan is already put in there, and we don't really have a say. You can try and get other business owners to come here, but they're all afraid. They're afraid. And you know what? That's sad. And where are we going to put those people that are going to go to this new hotel over here? Where are those people going to go? We don't have anything. The mayor says they have to figure that out themselves. What are they going to do with them? And that's going to impact our businesses. It's going to impact the people who live here. Not everybody who lives here doesn't have a car. People have cars. That's just the way it is. It's Easton. This is not New York City. It's getting harder and harder to just stay quiet about anything because it's sad. When this hotel goes up, it's just going to get worse.
Thank you.
Thank you for creating this mess.
Mr. Ely? I'm gonna try and wrap this up at 9. Right? How many people still want to speak? One?
Please,
One?
I'll move my stuff. One up.
All right.
I do want the opportunity.
Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind, sir, you know, we can try and keep this to around 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes or so, that would be great.
I'm sure.
I've probably been slacker than I should be enforcing things, but I think it's important for us to get a sense we had a chance to actually talk, so.
Chris Lembarski, 64 North 4th Street. Just want to echo the sentiments from the neighbors there on Bank Street. Thought that was an interesting point made, and I don't know if the notices will change, but I found it ironic that parking spaces can be reduced if there's a parking spot 600 feet away, but notices go out only 100 feet from impacted properties. I think that might be something that we can consider changing in the future. Ron, to your point about parking, the parking question, my proposal for parking is to have the developers actually take care of the parking and keep them in the plans, not remove them after they've gone through and been approved for boards and other things. You know, put the parking underneath the buildings like were in original plans. If we're not careful, we are going to grow and develop ourselves out of being the success that we are. Easton is a charmed city. People like to live here for the historic aspect. If we create a giant cross section of business entertainment and there's isolated pockets of residents might want to leave. Other people aren't just going to flock down and then find themselves restricted and handcuffed because they can't develop their properties the way they would want to, and they have to come and have these challenges from the new zoning. We don't know what the current developments and what already has been approved will do to the city. I certainly share some of the opinions that have been expressed, and I hope it doesn't get that bad, but we do not know what the current commitments will result in. And I agree with you, Mr. Etchison, what you said earlier, we need to pace ourselves with reality. Currently, we are over our skis. We are already out ahead of ourselves in terms of the parking issue, in terms of all the apartments that are going to come online. We don't know what that's going to result in. And if we create a cross-section of business development and require development in that area to be a minimum of 5 stories, and then restrict residential areas, and then in our case on 4th Street, to the point that Martinson made, if they are not required to have parking there, and then they're restricted on height, they're going to be squeezed, and then something's going to be created there that, who knows what. But at the moment, it's 102 parking spot delta with the current proposal, because they're going to raise a 42 spot parking lot that residents and workers at businesses use when they come downtown to work. And then they're going to be given or have received a letter from Louis Campos for 60 parking spots in the garage. So they're eliminating 42 and getting 60. And on State Theater nights, I think that point was raised, people leave because it is a major issue. I think Mr. Etchison, you said it already. There is no public transportation. We have already outgrown ourselves, and we do not yet know what the results will be of the current development. I think we need to think more strategically about that before we venture off into a 120-page proposal of another new reality. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ely, last but not least.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, he gets it right.
You were the first person who spoke off.
I don't know. Who knows?
Heard about time. Heard about our meeting. Come on now. What do you got?
Kurt Ely, 305 West Monroe Street in Easton. I'm going to ask if our planner, our city planner, we've never really met, correct? Have we met? Right. Yeah, we haven't met. So welcome to Easton.
I'm a long life resident of Easton.
Longer than I then. I've only been here for 24 years.
I lived on Southside College Hill, and I'm currently living in the West Ward, going on 22 years.
Beautiful. So then you're well aware, with all your training experience, that the municipality's planning code of Pennsylvania directs that after, I believe it's 10 years, a comprehensive plan is to be written. And the purpose of that comprehensive plan is to direct, educate our zoning, not the reverse. The law in the state of Pennsylvania says that that comprehensive plan needs to be updated and it needs to be adhered to. We've had an experience here with a prior planner who did quite the opposite of that. You know that, I know that, and we're stuck with what we've got. But we're repeating a process. We've got a current comprehensive plan that is 2 years of time, enormous numbers of residents, professionals from outside of our state, paid, there, tons of money were paid, a lot of effort went into our current comprehensive plan. Prior to that comprehensive plan, an enormous amount of time, effort, and money went into our current code. The uses, the zones that were created, enormous amounts of time and effort went into that. And what I'm seeing here will destroy that. I applaud the effort to make it clearer. I applaud the effort not to help developers figure out how they can do a better job and a bigger job of developing, but I just think it makes sense. It's the right thing to do to make things work more smoothly and clearly. Other cities manage to do that. We should be able to do that as well. But what I'm seeing here doesn't make sense to me. Adaptive reuse is an inappropriate zone when we're talking about making changes in a residential zone by right, like the South Side, and making a rather large chunk of it and turning it around into an adaptive reuse to accommodate a current owner. That's spot zoning. That's not permitted. That's not the way to go here. If they have a desire to develop and they have the opportunity to do that by coming to the Planning Commission and going for not a use, not a variance, but they have the opportunity to go and request what is already in our zoning code. Why would we need to change that for them? We don't need to do it. And to call that, well, we'll just make it easier for them, that's the whole point here. We really are at a point where we're not trying to make things easier for developers. We're trying to follow a comprehensive plan.
Can I just speak to that one point? So that does read to the comprehensive plan because they're gonna have 100 and some affordable housing units built there. Plus they're gonna have commercial units below that are going to
And
help.
they can come right here and explain all of that.
They will be here. They will be here for all that.
To explain all of that. So as a result, we don't need to change the zone to accommodate that. If their conditional arrangement fits our laws currently, they come here and they ask for direction, and they're going to be able to put conditions on it at that time. And then they can go about doing what they choose. If they want to appeal them, they have recourse. It's already there. There's no need. They could decide the following Thursday, after all these changes and that zone gets created, they could decide to lop off a piece of that property and sell it. But now we have somebody else coming in who's got an adaptive reuse list of uses by right. I'm just saying that, to me, has in no way, shape, or form is directed by our comprehensive plan, nor are many other things that we don't have time to discuss. I believe we've got a legacy left over by very poor planning, and we're kind of stuck with it. Except we've got a new planner, and we've got the opportunity to kind of do it right, because we need to do it right this time. It's an abomination, in my opinion. Now, I'm just a layperson. I don't have your level of training experience, but I do know the codes. I do understand the comprehensive plan and the municipality's planning code. And I'd like this body to have the benefit of the very best planning that we can do and the establishment of the very best code. And you know what? I think we've got a really good one. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we're a little bit past. Is there anything else, staff, that we need to look into today? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Please. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. All right, thank you, everyone.